Guys, I'm getting right to the point. This is an incredible story, and it's honestly one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. So this is a 2-part episode. We talked to Michelle Holling-Brooks, and she is the owner of Unbridled Change. She's a healer, a coach, an author, an equine professional, and so much more, which you will learn. I am Lauren Leon.
And I'm Frank.
We are a married couple learning how to develop our own intuition, and this is episode 45 of Clairvoyaging. Wayfeather Media presents Clairvoyaging.
What's going on, everybody?
Hi.
How's it going?
Howdy do.
Howdy doody.
You guys, this is a good one. I'm not exaggerating.
Man.
This story has stuck with me for at least a month now.
I think about it every day.
Like, truly. Okay, before we get to the episode, we want to tell you, can you give us some stories? It's almost October. By the time you're listening to this, it might be October. But that's spooky season. And we want to do a slightly different episode, right, Frank?
Yeah, we don't do a lot of the spooky stuff on this show.
Yeah.
But, 'tis the season.
Every so often, you got to get a little bit spooky.
Let's get spooked.
Let's get... Okay. Let's get a little creepy.
Ooh.
Oh, he's a ghost. If you have an unexplained story or someone you know has one, I'm talking shifting timelines, paranormal stories, alien encounters. What else? A glitch in the matrix, as they call it.
Yeah.
Like we send us an email.
Write us the story. Tell us the story.
Or you could audio record it and like you want your own voice, that's fine. Or write it out, email it to us, and we'll read it and we'll put it all together in one episode.
Go to www.clairvoyaging.com and click on submit a story if you'd like. And there's instructions there if you want to actually submit us like an audio recording of your story, and I'll edit it for you. Doesn't have to be perfect.
Or email us, clairvoyagingpodcast@gmail.com.
I would like to take this moment to acknowledge the fact that at the end, our end credit roll for the show, when I'm giving our URLs, I say W. W. Most people probably don't stay till the end. Let's just don't, but guess what they're going to do this time?
Listen for your W.
Go check out W.
W. Okay, another thing. We're going to Duluth, Minnesota, because our pilot Remixed got into a film festival there.
For those of you who aren't completely up to date, Lauren and I also make short films on occasion, narrative short films with our friends. And the most recent one we worked on is called Remixed.
And it's available to watch on our Patreon.
Yeah, go check it out.
If you're a Patreon member, subscriber.
But if you are in Duluth, come say hi.
Yeah, come see our screening. It is October 3rd at 12:45 p.m. at the Zeitgeist Cinema One Theater. We're in the comedy block. It's going to be a fun time. I've never been to Minnesota before.
Me neither.
So I don't know. If you know someone who likes comedy pilots, send them over. So let's get to Michelle. This is part 1 of a 2-part series. And this episode is not a video interview because we didn't have the setup when we talked to her, which was like at least a month ago.
Yeah. This was originally supposed to be a 1-part episode, but the story is so bananas and Michelle is so amazing that we had to book her for a second interview to really get into it deeper.
We were like, can you please come back? Because there's so much more to ask you.
She is... Buckle up, friends. Buckle up.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get to it.
Let's do it.
Please enjoy Michelle Holling-Brooks.
Let's go.
Yeah. Michelle Holling-Brooks, thank you so much for joining us on Clairvoyaging. We're so happy that you're with us. So can you give us a little backstory on how you got here, what you're doing now, all the things?
That's a big thing.
I know.
I'll try. I'll try to be as well. First, thank you for having me in, and I hope that this is a good conversation. I always like to start off my backstory inviting people to because it's a little like sensational, and it's a lot of literal things that happened to me as I kind of grew in this lovely spiritual mystic field. But I invite people to like walk with it metaphorically through their own shoes. And so they can really kind of see themselves in it, even though the physical things might not have happened to them. They've had moments where they have felt all these different things. So I always like to invite people in and, feel free to ask questions, pause me, do whatever you need.
Okay, I love that. All right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big kind of thing is like, kind of my whole life, I've always been, very interactive with all the fields and all the different things. And, my mom loves to tell the story that she would catch me, babbling away into the corner. And when she would ask me, like, who are you talking to? I'd be like, oh, my friends. And they're this people and that people. And the huge trauma story, that the family loves to tell is that my sister came in one day and killed all my bubble people and she stomped on them. And I got like so upset.
Oh, no. Oh, wow.
Just,
yeah.
like not happy because it was a little trauma. But as I kind of went in when I was 13 years old, I was super, super sick. And so I was bit by a mosquito that had equine encephalitis. And so my brain started to swell, and then it dominoed into viral spinal meningitis at the same time. So my brain stem and the lining of my brain and everything just was not so happy. I ended up slipping into a coma for 7 days. And during that 7 days, they were preparing my family like, look, if she wakes up, that will be interesting. But we don't even know what she will be when she wakes up. And now as a mom, I'm like, oh my gosh, like how horrible must that have been? And I always preface it and say, my family has their side of this story, but this is mine. And so when I did wake up, obviously, hello, I'm here. there were some things that really were not okay with my brain. And so I had a traumatic brain injury. I was deaf from all the swelling that had happened within my system. I was blind, but not like dark blindness, like light blindness. So all that swelling was in the back of my visual cortex and all that area. And so light was incredibly painful to me. And so I just saw just complete whiteness, and it was overpowering to me. I was also paralyzed from the middle of my back down. And so I couldn't walk or move. And then the fourth thing, though, that really was the kicker is I had no memory. So I woke up a complete blank slate. I didn't know that I was a human. I didn't know that I was in a body. I didn't know that people around me were trying to help me. All I know is that I woke up, and these are words that I've put on it from the flip side. When I woke up, I just didn't know anything. And I was just a body that was an incredible amount of pain because they had cut open the back of my head. And so it was like in one of those halo things. Oh my God. And I didn't have anything to regulate myself to. So my body rhythms were completely dysregulated. I didn't have anything to anchor myself to. And I didn't know I could talk. I didn't know I could move. I didn't know anything. And so I was just this very survival animalistic thing that just would try to fight. But of course I couldn't move and I didn't know what was happening. So they ended up restraining me and, keeping me in a really confined state because nothing could reach me and they couldn't reason with me because I didn't have any of that capabilities on. They just didn't know that yet. They didn't know to the extent of what was happening to me. Let's fast forward a little bit. I started to get very, because I didn't know that I was anything different than anybody else, everything to me was the same thing. I was no different from the bed, from the table, and so that state that everybody tries to get to of having no self, that was my state. And I started to just track energies and track different things with me. And I called them the shadows. And the ones that came in that I could predict, that would move me, do something in a rhythmic pattern, in a predictable pattern, just get their job done and leave. I didn't have a problem with those. Those turned out to be like the nurses and the doctors and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But there were 3 shadows that I couldn't work with at all. I could feel that they wanted something from me. I could feel that they were very upset. And that turned out to be my mom, my dad, and my sister. And because they wanted me to be okay. They wanted me to be the Michelle that they knew. And at this point, they didn't know what type of Michelle, was coming back to them. And eventually, once I started to really get in the routine, I would really try to withdraw from those energies because they were just so difficult for me to deal with their emotional bodies asking for something from me and really pushing, and me just feeling like I don't know what you want, but it's not something I can give you.
Whoa.
So that was the re-entry, so to speak, into this world. Once I figured out I couldn't run away from people, like I couldn't push them away and I couldn't fight, because I went in the hospital maybe like 5'8". By the time I left the hospital 3 months later, I was 6'1". And so my body grew. Oh yeah, it was crazy. And then, so I was in a lot of pain, but my body grew that much to disperse all the swelling and all the excess that was, in the system.
Yeah.
It needed more room. And so, as you can imagine, I was a spindly little thing. I wasn't walking. I wasn't doing anything else like that. So people could easily move my body, even though it was long. It just it was easy for it to move. And so I just stopped fighting. And so I went all the way into a freeze response and total dissociation because I didn't know how to communicate with the world around me. I didn't know they were trying to communicate with me because I didn't have language. And so I just became this lump that people could move and do whatever they want with. And as long as it was in those rhythms that I could predict, I was fine. That felt fine to me.
Yeah.
If it was in the unpredictable ones, that was not okay. And so when they sent me home, because medically I was able to be okay to go home, that was a huge problem for me, because now I'm back with those 3 people that I don't particularly feel comfortable with. And I'm in an environment that I didn't know how to sync to. I had synced to the rhythms of the hospital. I had synced to the comings and goings of all the people. And now I was in this room that had a memory of a Michelle that I wasn't. And so it was just incredibly not okay, because my family thought she'll remember.
Right.
And the word memory and I became a 4-letter word. I was like, if one person says that word to me, you better be ready for this thing to come back at you.
Yeah.
So I had been home probably about close to 4 months at this point. I had figured out they had this little bell thing. I didn't know it made a sound audibly. This is me again giving words to things. And so I would ring a bell and they would come and figure out what's wrong with me and what I needed. And then they would leave because they had to go back to their lives, right? They weren't like the hospital that had people staffed to be with me 24/7. And so it was this world of isolation, loneliness, not understanding. And when they did move me into things, it was things like PT and OT. And they were trying to, at this point, they had figured out the hearing loss, and they had figured out that was causing me not to speak. At that point, they couldn't quite remember that it was a memory thing because I wasn't speaking. So nobody could understand if it was, I wasn't speaking because I didn't know how to speak, or I wasn't speaking because of another issue.
Yeah.
And it was just, I didn't feel a reason to speak because why would I? I didn't know that I was connected to anything around me or anything like that. So it wasn't even, I had guttural sounds and I definitely wailed apparently when I was hurting. But other than that, there was nothing there. And so my parents were grasping at straws. They knew that I loved horses before I had gotten sick. And I was a barn rat, I was this little kid that they drove to lessons every week and just, I wanted to stay as long as possible.
Yeah.
And therapeutic riding wasn't in the area that I was in. This was in 1990 and we're just outside of DC because my whole family's government and military and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And, so they were like, okay, well, we'll take her back to the barn. Maybe there's something in there. I kind of try to put myself in my parents' shoes. I'm like, how'd they figure that out without internet and everything else like that? But luckily they did. And when we went to the barn, I don't know if you guys know, but smell is on a different pathway than memory. And so it has a totally different neural network pathway to get to memory. The olfactory system does.
Okay. Yeah.
then like recall memory, so to speak. And so when the smell of the barn hit me, that was the first time I had like a moment of remembrance, a moment of like, I want to be in this place. I don't know what this place is. I don't know anything about this place, but I could feel like the cellular pull.
Wow.
Like, be aware of this. And so for the first time when my dad picked me out of the car and put me in the wheelchair, I was finally willing to take my hands, which they had been trying to get me to do for months, put them on the wheelchair wheels and wheel myself into the big, huge, long barn that was there. And like 4 stalls down on the left was a horse that I had been riding. It wasn't mine. You know, I was just like showed up at the barn. And he looked like a gorgeous yellow highlighter to me because I saw with my energy eyes. And so I personally believe we're all empathic. We all have these energy senses. It's just that we don't use them. Well, when my physical senses went away, these ones were right there to take over. And I didn't know at the time that I was interacting with the world differently than other people. So I thought he looked like a beautiful yellow highlighter. When he turned out he was a dark bay horse, which is a brown with like a black tail and a little white star on his forehead. But that's not what he looked like to me. He was just this gorgeous being of light. And I wanted to go to him. And so I wheeled my wheelchair over there for the first time, and it hit that stall door, and it should have freaked him out. This is a big jumper. This is not a therapeutic riding barn or anything like that. But he didn't. And he put his head up and over my shoulder. And it was the first physical touch I was willing to work with.
Oh, man.
It was the first time a being touched me that I didn't recoil or just leave my body. I was like, how close to you can I get? Right? Like I just buried myself in this horse, what felt like an eternity to me. And I said my very first word, and I said his name, Sketchy. I shouldn't have known his name. I shouldn't have known anything about him. And that little guttural sound was able to come out for me.
Oh my God.
And so that was the moment, that I agreed to tether myself back to this world because I wanted this horse. I wanted to be a part of that world. And all these humans were really savvy. They figured out that, oh, Michelle's finally doing things.
Yeah.
And so then they used it like a major carrot, but that's fine. And somehow they talked them into letting me ride him. It's so not the safe way to do it. So this part of the story, I do not approve at all. But they ended up tying me to the horse, like into the saddle, and I was like a little weeble wobble. If I went to the side, I just started to come down, and so the ropes would hold me, and they'd shove me back up, and then I would fall. And within 6 months of doing that, like 2 and 3 times a week, I started to get my balance back. I started to be able to use crutches and stuff like that. 6 months after that, as a freshman in high school, I was trying out for the basketball team.
What?
And so. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So schedule was like, he literally helped me heal my physical body. But more than that, the barn became the place that I was able to find myself again. Because I still had all the hearing issues and I still had the sight issues. At this point, as long as I had like the crazy glasses, that had the sides and the thing, and I had a thing over my head, I could make out like shapes and patterns, but I still couldn't hear. So they were teaching me to sign. And if you really listen to my voice, you're going to hear there's a little guttural sound to it because I started to go into speech pathology. Once the hearing started to come back online a little bit, and to where everything sounded like I was underwater for a while, but at least I could start to make out associations. So this picture and this thing, and I could associate it together. I was able to catch up pretty quickly in school with help. But the problem is the energy doors were blown open. And so I was porous. It was like walking around without skin, and all of the different emotional bodies, parts of everybody, it was all there. And I didn't realize that I was interacting with the world differently until I was sitting at a friend's house. And this was about a year after I got out of the coma. So at this point I was pretty mobile, but still had that underwater sound and everything else like that.
Yeah.
And I was a parrot. So I didn't understand the words that I was saying. I would hear a word and I would parrot it back. Think of little kids. You guys have kids, right? Like, when they don't realize what they're saying and they look at you like, what?
We have a 2-year-old. That's exactly what he does.
So like, that's basically, I was 2, and so I would parrot things around me because I had the mental capacity of a 13, 14-year-old, but I didn't have the language of knowing what that meant. And so I'm sitting there eating my little bowl of cereals in this little weird breakfast nook of this friend who lived right next door to me. So it was easy to like get me from point A to point B. And the cat threw up. And I thought I heard the mom ask, why did the cat throw up? And I heard the cat say, because of the divorce. And so I just parroted, because of the divorce. What I didn't realize is none of this conversation was happening like on an audible level. Oh, and the mom like dropped whatever she was doing. She like looked at the dad. The dad was like, what are you talking? My friend like whacked me to the point that I like fell over. And I was just like, what? I don't understand. And that was a moment when I was like, oh, what I'm hearing, people are not hearing. What I see, people don't see. And that's when I started questioning, like, it is the way that I'm interacting with the world the way everybody else was? The answer was no. And so then I went to what I called a ground. I was like, I'm not going to show anybody any of this stuff. I'm not going to let anybody see behind the curtain of any of that, because it was scary. And I had such a big
reaction from that alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, never again, not doing that. So that's the little background story on where that started. And then from the trauma healing that I went through, I really was interested at first in the physical side of things. And so I really went into therapeutic writing and helping kids with physical disabilities, and worked my way towards eventually really understanding the emotional and mental trauma of that stuff. And one of the things that I realized very early on is that everybody has been through a version where they feel they have no voice, where they don't have any control over their body. They don't have a sense of self. It might not be the literal versions, but it's the same thing, right? It's the same type of, as far as their body's concerned, it's in their own way, the same thing. And so that really put in the niche then of where I started to originally work with the horses, because the horses were my anchor and my way back of working on the psychotherapy and the coaching side for the mental health. And so I stayed behind what I call like a science shield for a very long time in the field that I was in. And when people would ask, I would say, neuroscience was just all a buzz at that time. And like, I had all the studies in front of me. And then I would slip up and somebody would say, Michelle, how the heck did you get from here to here? I was watching the same thing. I was sitting in the same thing. I heard the exact same thing the person said, and you're bringing in information that's never been told before. And I'd be like, oh, really? Are you sure about that? And it's because I didn't want anybody to know that I was working with different levels, like I'm talking to their soul and I'm talking to their team.
You're like hearing extra stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And working with, and I could see, because my eyes can see, I'm not doing it right now, so don't worry. I have ethics now. I've taught myself to do, but my eyes, if I let myself do it, like chakras, mediums, inside, remote viewing, the whole 9 yards, because that's what we can do if we allow that to happen. And so it was very overwhelming to me. And so I would like get in and get out. You know what I mean? I'd like go into whatever place I needed to be and then get back out. I liked horses. I liked nature. I liked simple things.
Yes.
And it was before I really kind of understood how to work with it and how to allow myself to have filters of different things of how to work with the clairs in a more ethical and important and supportive way for myself as a being and for others. And so it was quite a journey. That was another journey of how I finally came out of what I call the spiritual closet.
Yeah.
And finally let people see the other side, and now teach people how to work with their empathic skills and other stuff like that. And then the energy healing and work of still really understanding, because when I was only on the science side working through the mind to get to people, is like the body wanted to lead. And I was trying to come through the mind, but the body really was the one that was like, hey, I know the answers. I know how to unwind this in a way that's might seem less efficient at first, but by the end is. And so eventually I had to tell people, like, we got to come through a different door. We got to come through. Yes, the mind is a part of it, but it's learning how to sort this out and allowing that trauma to be released from the body. And so that's what I absolutely love helping people do. And now I tell people, I let them behind the curtain to see what that is. But I had to get hit with a universal 2x4 before I was willing to do that.
What? This is bananas.
Just pick a place.
Okay.
Pick a place. Dude. Place you want to dive in.
The fact that, first of all, yes, I was crying.
You're crying?
Yeah. Her story of, I can't even think about it again. Her story of talking to the horse. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, that was good.
I was there with you.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, it's so beautiful. Tears rolling down my face. Our listeners are used to me crying. It's just so like, horses are such like amazing, just beautiful, like huge animals. And anyway, the fact that a tiny mosquito caused all of that is unreal, first of all. Like, yeah, I'm so overwhelmed by how much like trauma and all the things that just one little like bug caused. So I'm still in that for just a second.
I mean, yeah. Okay. All right. Hold on a second.
Scrolling.
I have to scroll. I've never had to scroll before.
He has electronic notes now.
Yeah.
He's upgraded.
I upgraded.
Basically, a second with the horse. Okay, go on.
Yeah. Do you want me to mute you so you can cry it out for a second?
No, I'm good.
Schedule is amazing. And I will tell you that, like, probably what you're also feeling is they come with me. They're my team. Oh, and so I can say this on this one. Like, you're feeling Schedule right now, right? And there's a whole bunch of other beautiful
Schedule.
Yeah, Schedule A is his name.
Schedule A.
He's passed away now, obviously, but yeah. And that was a whole moment. When he died, I became untethered because he was my tether. And so he died my senior year.
I can't.
I know. It was scary. And like, I mean, I just like completely floated out. I had nothing tethering me back in.
Yeah.
And it became what I call like the abusive years, like the abusive Michelle years, because I was like, I don't want to be in this body. I don't want to be in this world. I want out. And so like eventually, like at 23, the relationship that I thought would be with me for my whole life, was crumbling, and it was two hurt people that were incredibly hurt together, hurting each other. And so I just was like, I'm done. I took a handful of pills and I was like, that's it, no more. And this is when another animal, sorry, I'm adding to Frank's list.
Nope, it's okay.
Baron, my beautiful German Shepherd, he licked into my mouth and caused a vomit reflex after I had passed out on the basement floor of our basement apartment. Yep. And so I woke up with just him looking at me and giving me this vision. And he asked me, he was like, why don't you value you the way I do? Why don't you love yourself the way I love you? And he showed me a vision of my soul. And I'm like, I know animals don't lie, Yeah. And so I was like, there's no way that's me. And I looked into the mirror with like pieces of, pills in my hair. And I was like, hollow eyes looking back at me. And I was like, I don't know who that person is. I got to go find her. And so that's really where my healing journey behind the scenes, not the one I gave everybody professionally in front of the scenes, but that personal one, which took me into every classroom, like into shamanism and wisdom teaching traditions, and trying to figure out how do I find an anchor again within myself that really brings me back in there. So animals, come on, they're a part of my team. Yeah. You will feel them be with you.
Have you been studied?
Yeah.
Has anyone been like, I need to, I feel like we can have a whole podcast just of you and your story. Like, and I don't mean an episode, I mean an entire podcast.
If people have questions, I don't mind coming back and chatting. When early on, when I was healing these parts of my brain and my spine that they truly believed couldn't be healed, they were very much hooking me up to things because they could not understand how riding a horse was equaling the healing in the body.
But they probably weren't looking in the right places. Yeah.
There you go. That was just what I was going to say. What they weren't looking at is it was the relationship between schedule and I, and that willingness for me to be held by him. That was what was creating the healing that they could not understand. Because if you hook me up to one thing, my spine still is a hot freaking mess. They cannot tell you why I can move and do all that stuff because they say it's still disconnected, but my body built new pathways. So I call it like the starfish energy. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, okay, this pathway doesn't work. So let me try to figure out a middle one.
Okay. Let me ask some very basic questions. First of all, after all of this, like the physical trauma, mm-hmm. how do you feel now? How are you?
Yeah, I'm like physically like 100%. After 2 years, they deemed me physically healed, gold star body, like go on with yourself.
What?
And so
Michelle, can I just point out one time I took a bite of a salad and threw out my back and was like in bed for 2 weeks. And what you
Frank leaned forward to take a bite with his fork and he's like, well, I threw my back out and you have to come pick me up from work.
Yeah, proceeded to take 2 weeks off of work from lettuce. Okay.
Hey, mosquito, lettuce, it's
Oh my God. Okay. So that's one very basic question that doesn't even tap into what I'm getting into. Did you eventually get access to your memories from before the accident eventually? Or is this like fresh drivens now?
Yeah.
For years and years and years, I tried. So once I went in that behind the scenes seeker journey that I didn't let anybody else into.
Yeah.
I mean, if there was a reader, a shaman, a psychic, I mean, if you name it, I went to like from a Dolores Cannon trained person to every classroom I could put myself in. I was like, hello, look at my field. Tell me how this is working. They'd be like, I don't know what that is.
What? Oh my God.
They would just be like, yeah, no, we don't know what your system's doing. We don't know how it's doing it. And they couldn't give me answers. And everybody who tried to read for me just hit the same blank, like literal blank piece of paper. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Like looking at your energy field or hit the paper before age 13?
But if they tried to pull up anything from me before 13, it was just a blank sheet of paper.
What?
And they all saw the same thing.
So any of your memories from before 13 or your experiences, did you have to just are they just stories that your family's told you?
They've told me some stories. It was very interesting because my reaction to Michelle, remember you do this. Like once that hearing came on between like freshman year to when I went off the rails with schedule dying. So that 3 years, if anybody tried to tell me that, that was like, you better duck and cover because I was going to have a response. It was not very measured, you know?
Yeah.
And so it became this thing where they just stopped talking to me about it. And it became a thing even with my friends because they would say, oh, you remember this from childhood, like a cartoon or something like that. And I would just look at them and I'd be like, please stop asking that question.
Yeah.
Oh, that's gotta be so frustrating.
So I'm assuming you then essentially had to reestablish a relationship with everyone in your life at that point?
Yeah. And so it's a very interesting thing. And so the other thing that happened when schedule died, I didn't have an anchor. And I also didn't really have a significant bond with the people around me because you guys have a little, and they bond with you when you're in utero.
Yeah.
That bond is already starting to form and already being there. So they're syncing to your rhythms. They're syncing to your voice. They're syncing to the rhythms of your house and your life and your movements. Right.
Yeah.
And so there's that familiarity that's already linking them when they come in. All that was gone. So I didn't have that same level of loyalty to the family unit that happens. This eventually became a very positive thing for me because I wasn't bogged down by family trauma history stories. Right. But in the beginning, it was a significant problem because all the things that, you give family a pass for, oh, that's so-and-so, this is just what they do. It's okay because they're family. I would say, why?
Yeah.
That's not okay.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I challenged a lot of it, which created a lot of issues early on. And actually, I ended up leaving my house my senior year because it was just such a huge divide that was happening.
Okay. How was your personality? And I promise I won't just ask all the basic, physical questions. I have many more. But did your personality shift between before the accident and after? Or is there we're like, oh, this is Michelle.
No.
Okay.
And this is where I give my family permission to have their own story. And I can imagine as a mom now how incredibly difficult this was to have this happen to their child. That being said, their story is their story. And this was my experience. And I had to figure out really early on that I had to honor it from my perspective, even though we've done a lot of healing. We've gotten in a really good place now, but it was like a 20-year journey to get there. And what I was literally told, is that the day you woke up, the Michelle that was our daughter died.
Okay.
And that's how it was left for a long time.
Yeah.
And I get it, but then also from the me standpoint, that was being disowned. That was being told because I questioned religion. My family attributed my survival to the God and the religion that they were. And I saw that this God thing, he could sit and spin somewhere because why would you do that to a little kid?
Yeah.
It's taken me a long time to get my relationship with this divine back online, but in the beginning, it was like, don't bring that God stuff to me. Don't bring that whatever, it was very much, that's why I loved shamanism at first. I was like, oh, I can get into shamanism. I can get into these other,
right.
But it took me quite a while. That was pretty much bringing the soul into it. I was willing to work with spirit, but not soul. Took me the universal 2x4 in my late 30s for me to finally agree to talk to my soul. That was a whole situation. I won't derail you with that.
Oh no. Do you consider this somewhat of like a rebirth almost? Or not a rebirth, but like a, oh man.
I call it a reset.
Reset. Okay.
So what it did for me is all the things that a lot of clients struggle with, which is well, this can't be real. This can't be this can't be that. I don't struggle with that because this was my real thing.
Right.
And so as far as my willingness to follow the threads that are given to me through the other clairs, I don't question them because I know they're real. Right. And so that reset, I think, of taking out all that conditioning and programming that happens to us, I didn't have to worry about that. What I had to worry about was the trauma of me hiding it. That I had to take on.
Yeah. Sure.
But the questioning, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? I needed to learn how to sort it. I needed to learn how to create my own symbolism and understanding and language with it, but I didn't question that it was real.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Let me ask you this.
Reality.
Right. You mentioned you were ready to connect with spirit, but not soul. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because even for me, I'm 40 something episodes into this podcast. I'm like, wait a minute, help me partition this. Describe that a little bit more for me, please.
Yeah. So spirit, what I was willing to talk to, I'm trying to give it words. This is so hard because this stuff doesn't really have words, but we're going to try. And we're going to maybe invent some as we're working together, right?
Sounds good.
when I was working, spirit is like what a lot of people would call like that higher self, right? Like that part that's not super attached to the ego, but it's not going all the way to the soul. It's not going all the way to the soul, then is attached to this divine universe, whatever you're gonna like say is part of the order of creation. Spirit's like the go-between, the in-between, this big body over here that feels hard to get to, and then what we're experiencing here. And I was totally fine playing in this quote unquote fishbowl. You know, I liked this one. I didn't want to talk to anything beyond it because I really had a grudge with it. I didn't agree with it. I had a list of mile long of like, why would my soul sign me up for this? I'm going to argue with, and parts of me will still argue with that. I call it my suggestions to the universe box. You know, like I just really, I want to put this in, whatever, like being is in charge of that suggestion box is probably like, Michelle, for real, you were back again? And I'll be like, yeah, hi.
Just going to put this in here. Thank you so much.
I feel like
I'll go into surrender and acceptance, but you know, I just want this noted.
Yeah. I feel like some things could be a little better.
But I also feel like that's almost like a divine responsibility to try. That's like part of the process of improving, right? Of improving the whole thing, the whole system, right? Mm-hmm. It's like how people say, like dissent is patriotic. It's like, but also that at a universal scale, at a source scale.
So that's I'm sure everybody has their own interpretation, but when spirit is more associated with what's closer to you and to the other beings, that are on the planet, animal, plant, whatever, rock, stone, all the goods, brothers and sisters that are out there. And then soul starts to get us into the bigger workings that have all the lifetimes housed in it and are working on a big divine timeline that I give suggestions to.
I've heard like Jules has, my Reiki mentor has said that like the soul is like the repository of all your past lives, all the things that your soul has experienced. It's kind of
it's out of time, so it doesn't. It's like past, future, wiggly wonkily. Like it's inside. If you guys like quantum physics things, like I have this little book that, the quantum computer is the blocks, but they don't know what happens in the box. You know what I mean? It's like that's the soul. We don't know what happens in the soul, but we know what happens. So
Okay. All right. More. When you were Helen Kellered, deaf, blind, plus paralysis, it sounds like you had this state of oneness that you were like automatically in. Was it something along the lines of like, were you living as a form of your higher self without any of the context? Or, oh man, I haven't heard a story like this, so I don't even have the right language to express myself.
I mean, you said you were like such a blank slate. It's almost like literally a physical being without the understanding of
it sounds like
of all the spirit stuff yet or something.
Was
right?
that it? Or
it was all me and I was all it. So like even though I was tracking them as shadows, they were me. So like when I was in the hospital, I could start to track those shadows way before they would get there, and that was because they were leaving their house. So like time and space is. Oh no, this is gonna get a little trippy fast.
No, like, it's great.
It's like is not like real. So like when I was telling that story with schedule, you were feeling what you were feeling because you were there with me in that moment. Because there is no time and space. So you were witnessing schedule and I in that moment.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I truly felt like I was there.
She wasn't like she was integrated into the blanket fully without the distraction of physical, yeah?
Correct.
Okay.
Man.
Yeah. And so
part of the blanket.
That's what newborns feel like, and they can't express anything. They just cry and wail.
And they're
overwhelmed, and they just see shapes and shadows.
And then we move them without asking them. I mean, I can't even tell you how like incredibly hyper vigilant I was with my kiddos, because I was like, don't you pick that baby up until they give you a sign to be able to because like I knew what it was like to have somebody just pick up my body and move it. You know what I mean? Without even a pause for a nonverbal response. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That must have changed the way you parented so much, like, or just informed the way you parented.
Yeah, it informs everything that I do. The way I work with clients, the way I work with their body, if I'm doing, whether it's out in the arena still, because I still do equine and partnered psychotherapy and coaching, but a lot of what I do now is on the spiritual coaching and trauma-informed somatic work and stuff like that, helping the body. But we're so programmed to not even let the body ask a question. Like let it raise its hand, like let it reach for something that it actually wants to reach for, or let it tell us no, like we're so programmed. And I am a little hypervigilant to that because my body was trying to talk to people because that was the only thing it had. And people just kept overriding it, not because they were mean. They had a work to do and a job to do. They didn't want me to hurt myself.
Right.
Or they just were in habitual movements without knowing,
Do you have, is there still some like lingering, if a stranger is like, comes up to you and wants to meet you,
trauma response?
Yeah. Like, is there like, oh, I'm a hugger. And you're like, whoa, I need a second. Is there a response to that?
Yeah, I definitely was that way up until probably the universal 2x4 in 2016. If you tried to come within like a 3-foot radius, there was a solid, like you would hit an energy wall. Like I've had people like try to come in and hit this wall and they're like, oh, that was weird. And I'm like, oh no, that was me. Like you just think I'm here, but I'm actually here. You know what I mean? So yeah. But now I can come in for a hug. We're all good. But
yeah.
Prior to 2016, that was a no. And a startled response was, one of my most embarrassing moments ever was in like college, so I was on the basketball team in college. And so all the jocks like end up in the same kind of thing. And they were doing this mixer and this big football player was in there. It was like, everybody who's over 6 foot, stand up and switch chairs, which I just really don't like these mixers. Anyways, this big huge
that's
football player like thought he could just pick me up and move me. And he came up from behind and he did that. And I just reached over and just flipped him because I just took my whole energy body. Before I even could know, I like walked and sat down in the chair that I was heading for, and everybody's like, "Holy shit!" And I'm like, "What?" And then I saw then it like caught up to me what I just did, and I'm like, "Oh man, I'm never gonna date here."
Oh my god, that is so funny. Okay, hold on, I have more. Also, at this point, are you still 6'1"?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I grew all the growing that I was going to do. I grew in there, in that hospital. And then I was like, I was done. Just compressed it.
Okay. So hold on. You being able to affect you're the first person I've spoken to who's able to, you're talking about like having like your energetic body, like outside of your body to the point where you can flip a jock. Is that like, what other clairs do you have? Because that almost sounds like almost a telekinesis kind of, you can do things kind of thing. We got an eyebrow raised just now. Because I haven't spoken to anybody who's spoken towards that in particular.
Yeah. So the clairs, they're fun, right? Think of everything that you can do with your physical senses. Your energy body is the exact same. There's no difference between this thing and the subtle energy bodies. And as you embrace that, you realize that there is no difference. So, the clairs, the multidimensionals, the clairvoyance, the clairaudience, all the good stuff, clairsentience, clairknowing, where it just comes in because you're going into the big universal Google, and pulling that in. Like the clairgustance and clairaudience, which is, the smell and things. So yes, energy has different smells. Colors have a smell and a sense, and what that is, and the clairalience and bringing that in. And they also have a taste. It's not super fun when you work like I do, and I work with a lot of people on the healing journey, and you taste different bacteria have different tastes. Not so fun.
Oh, yikes.
But it's a really quick way that I can identify what's vibrating in a person's field and what's happening with it, because they all have their different signatures of what that is. Out to, being able to remote view, being able to astral project, touch things, move things. It's all in there.
You have it all. You have all the things.
You're making me realize like how, and I've heard this before, like from other places, that we are powerful beings and we've forgotten it because we're so distracted by the physical, or there's like a stuck feeling that we tend to have, or like mentally tied to like the concept of the boundaries that we have to abide by physically. And you're making me realize how much work I have to do.
How much fun do you get to have exploring
Look at that.
Yeah. Like another one is I was in this one workshop and I was having this real moment, and for whatever reason I had this really good idea that it was time to like take down my grid and put in another one, and so I lost like the difference of touch, and so my hand.
Wait, hold on. Sorry, what do you mean? What do you mean grid?
So each of us have a grid. Think of like a chassis for a car.
Okay.
You got that image?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that grid is within you, and it runs all the rest of you off of that grid. And think of like if you get in an accident and that grid gets bent up, the chassis gets bent up, then it doesn't matter what cosmetic stuff you do to the outside, you're still going to have a wonkiness because the grid itself has been disheveled. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if there's a big trauma to somebody, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and that makes their grid go off, then you can do all the work you want, making the cosmetics, the meridians, the this, that, and the other all happy, but it won't do any good because the chassis still, see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you can swap your grid, or you can swap your grid.
I wouldn't recommend it without support.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to what you were saying.
I got stuck. Like I was trying to get water because I really needed water. And I was I was at this workshop and my hand kept going through the water glass that I was trying to read. And I didn't realize that there was somebody watching me. And she was like, Michelle, by this point we had been in like 3 or 4 things together. So she kind of just like, walked around me, but she was like, do you want me to help you get water? I was like, yes, please. She like held the glass for me. And then I was like, can you let me back in the room because I need to go back into meditation? And so she opened the door for me because I couldn't open the door.
No.
So, you can vibrate to the point where your vibration is no longer physical.
I don't even know. I don't know how to address that.
No.
Don't recommend it. It wasn't the best.
So wait, how did you fix that?
She was watching this happen?
Yeah.
She just like raised an eyebrow and she just like put me back in the little room and like.
How did you fix that? How did you make that not happen anymore?
I sat down, talked to my team, and was like, "Okay, we gotta get this back online. My grid's got to come back, into focus."
Did that happen because of the meditation you're in? Like it was you like a heightened vibration state, or?
Yeah. Because I just I had gone too far too fast.
Okay.
In that thing, and so now I really believe in tempering and going. I've like all the stuff you're not supposed to do. I feel like I did it in that like 20 to 30s realm after Baron pitched me on like go find this person, and I was like okay, and then I luckily somehow I keep staying alive despite. Probably a lot of my best. And so that was a moment when I was really like trying to understand and fix that chassis because I wanted to jump ahead versus, in a more appropriate manner.
You have the opposite problem of this is like I have to wake up in the morning and like practice like getting more flexible so I'm not too rigid. And then I have some friends who are like yoga instructors and they're too flexible. You're too flexible.
Yes.
And you can pop your joints out on accident, but in a spiritual sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I got to like put myself back together. And sometimes I call them like re-entry problems because like I don't come back in like fully, and then it's like weird, like tunnel sounds and everything's a little bit wonky. But I would say that in the last like solidly since 2016, I've done a good job of not doing that again. So.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Have you met anyone, like, have there been people that have come to you because they have like a similar experience, or have you met anyone with this kind of experience? Because there's NDEs, which are like totally different than this. Yeah,
someone described what I was, that mine was a near-death experience. And I said, I don't lodge it that way.
Yeah, it seems super different.
It was that way, but it doesn't feel that way to me, because it wasn't like there was a download of information happening or like an awakening of a mind to bring that consciousness in. It was a reset, you know? And so I have worked with some other people who've had amnesia and different things, not necessarily to that same extent.
Yeah.
Of working with that. And I do tend to work with people with near-death experiences and other stuff, or trauma where their clairs woke up because they needed to survive the trauma that they were in.
Yeah.
And so my niche is kind of in that realm of helping people really sort through all the different things that are happening in their system and start to gain that anchor for themselves, you know, trusting and believing in themselves, because that's the really strong thing. One of the things that definitely came forward for me was when Schedule left me, I didn't have an anchor because he was my anchor. And so I don't ever want to build that type of relationship with any of the clients that I work with. I want them to feel whatever level they're working at, really secure within their own system and not dependent on another system. So that's a huge thing that I love to bring forward, is that everybody has their own version of their special sauce. Yeah. And can we help them make that connection to what I call their own holy divine trinity of themselves, their soul, and the divine, however they work with. And that's what we're working on, you know?
So now you do coaching. You also have a nonprofit, like with a bunch of horses, which are all beautiful. You do coaching. Do you also do like healing sessions, or like what is your main, what are people coming to you for?
Yeah, so all of it's under the umbrella of the nonprofit, because I want to have accessibility and a sliding fee scale, and how I work. And I used to work a lot of one-on-one. And so again, let me pause. I've been alluding to, because I didn't want to add to Frank's scroll.
Yeah.
But so in 2016, I was getting ready to launch a whole program to teach people how to do the version of equine partner psychotherapy I do. And I kept hearing, and I was going to certify people. I had worked my way up that rung in that field to like top 5 in the world. And so I was all ready to like walk out with my little, you know, self and be like, I'm going to train other people how to do this. It's going to be amazing. They'll free. And I heard, Michelle, you're only telling people half of what you do. You need to tell them the other part, i.e. the spiritual part. And I was like, no, that's not going to happen. And I was like, I can do that through science. I can do this through attachment work. I can do this through the body keeps the score somatic work. You know, I can teach people this without having to let them
bring in the woo woo. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to do it. And in fact, if you asked me about woo woo stuff before then, I was like, get offended. I'd be like, what? No, like thou dost protest too much.
Wow, right? Yeah.
So it's like people had inklings of it, but whenever they would try to ask me, I was so defensive about it. They'd be like, oh, okay, backing away slowly, you know? And so as I was in the middle of my first training, like I had people out at the bar and they were from all over. And I was like teaching them how to do the type of psychotherapy and partnered with horses that I teach. And my voice started going and it just kept going. By the time I was done with the third day, I could hardly speak at all. And I was like, what is happening? I like dominoed into this weird bronchitis thing, which then turned into this pneumonia thing. In like 3 months, it wouldn't go away. And so I kept like meditating on it. I was like raking on myself. I was like, and I, at this point, can change things pretty quickly. When something happens to my body, I can get it to go from point A to point B. And this is 3 solid months of like pneumonia. And I'm like, what the heck? I was getting really frustrated. And I was sitting in a meditation and I heard, you have cancer. Go to your doctor. And I was like, I did not have cancer. And then I like, it came in louder, this time like audibly outside of me. And usually I just hear it in an internal, but this one sounded like somebody was standing like right here saying to me, you have cancer. And I was just like, fine. And then I looked at myself and I was like, oh, snap. I do have cancer. And so I went to my doctor. Luckily,
what made you think that by looking at yourself?
Because I could see the different black spaces within me, and I'd worked with other cancer people, so I knew what it looked like.
Oh my God!
You know?
Okay. Yep.
And sorry, one more sub question. Yeah. When you say someone talks to you to tell you you have cancer, like who? Do you know who that is? Is it just one of your guides or?
Just one of my guys. I just call them my Wise One team now. Okay. It was maybe it was schedule or just the team.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter. You just know
to call them the team.
Got it.
It's just it's not you.
It's not me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So went to the doctor. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is happening. She was like, Michelle, it's just like a really bad pneumonia. And I was like, no, let me tell you why. And then I told her, and then she's like, oh, well, you're not wrong. And I'm like, yeah, I know I'm not wrong. So so then she put me in and anyways, it did come back, but it came back, a really crazy rare type, neuroendocrine sarcoma. And so it's a cancer that's on the nervous system, the endocrine mist of the nervous system that's within all of the lining of the organs in your body.
That doesn't sound good.
And so it didn't look, and you can't cut it out. I mean, it's like, it's all over. And so I went to the top big ones in the US and they all told me the same thing. We can't do anything with it. We can't cut it out. We can't radiate. It doesn't respond to anything. And so just get your affairs in order. And I was like, I have 2 little girls. Oh. This is not going to work. Because at that time, my oldest girl, she was in 4th grade. My youngest one was just going into like kindergarten. I was like, yeah, we gotta, come on team. Let's work with this. And as I really started to work in with it, it was just all that division that was happening within me. This front version of Michelle, this back version of Michelle, this completely traumatized version of Michelle that never woke up. And all those 3 versions of me just clashing and jockeying and ramming into each other. And, it just was, I could have taken the invitation that said, Michelle, you got to be all you. But I closed that door. And so the universe said, let's help you out. And so it went into what I call cancer as my teacher journey, and really stepping into that healing journey of really going deep and seeing those divisions and seeing where my body was stuck in the habitual fight or flight. It never came out of it. Like it was still back the way it was before, in that coma and before that coma. And so it was like a lot of healing work that needed to happen in there to bring that back in. So past that is when Unbridled Change grew to be beyond just the horses, to then include energy work, both private and group. And now it's grown to the point where it's more like group oriented, because there's only so many people I can work with through one-on-one. But if I go into group of teaching people how to do this for themselves and helping them develop their own senses, then, that is really, really it for me, is like that education point with the healing work combined, I
don't even have words. It's so amazing.
Well, hold on. How's your cancer diagnosis now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I am cancer free. I was able to work with it. It took me 2 years of working with it my way, because once they told me there was nothing that the allopathic world could do, I was kind of like, okay, fine. Thank you so much. That was the permission I needed to get my family to back off, because I was like, once they had that piece of paper that said there's nothing that can happen on that side, this is going to be on my side. But it was a real, there was moments where I was like, okay, this is going to end. And, how do I want to work with that transition? How do I want to work with my kids? If this doesn't heal the way I want it to, how can I still find and be in that grace and be in that unity? Because this whole thing is because I wasn't in unity, And so it was that moment when I finally kind of surrendered and said, okay, if this is my path, this is my path. And, we joked with the girls. I was like, you better talk to me or I'm going to turn lights on and off.
Oh my God. Okay.
And so
just like
luckily,
energy healing.
Well, I assume it's more than that because she had to take like actual action too.
Yeah.
Right. It's this combination of you said
it's
unity.
A combo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was a lot of action steps of like those places where I was in a divide externally. Yeah. I had to go in and work with all those places. So I just couldn't I am a Reiki master. I'm an Eden energy medicine practitioner. I have all these modalities under my belt. And those were great. They helped duct tape and baling twine me together long enough for me to work through all of the different parts of me really agreeing to say, okay, I'm opening the door. I'm coming out as the hot mess of Michelle that I am. And, I can still sit at I'm not a medium for hire in the room. That's the magic 8 ball. Like, hey, Michelle, ask me, no, I'm not going to do a reading for you in the middle of Starbucks.
Yeah.
But it's like just owning that and having that be a part of me and not trying to hide and divide and working with that.
I'm overwhelmed.
Wait, sorry.
I'm sorry.
When do we have to wrap?
We have like 3 minutes.
Damn it. No.
I know.
I have so many questions that we haven't even...
Nobody's ever asked me this many really good questions before. So
really?
You guys have the exclusive. No, they've only have like bits and pieces.
Really?
Some have got like
oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, through our journey on this podcast, like realizing how much of like physical or spiritual, emotional trauma is tied into like your becoming like a full whole person is like really, I have so many big, is there any way to postpone the next thing?
I don't think so.
Okay. Dude, Michelle, I might have to do a part 2 with you sooner than later.
Yeah.
Would you be okay with that?
Yeah. Whatever you guys feel is best for you and your audience.
There's a whole element that I have to ask about.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I know.
No, this is the first time someone's blown my socks off entirely. So we are going to have to talk again ASAP. And thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing this incredible story.
Yeah, this has been...
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been fun. Just like, it's kind of surreal when I hear it all linked together like that. I'm like, oh, snap. So thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah. No, and thank you for like sharing
I was,
it. Like
fully with you on the whole thing too.
Oh yeah, we were on a journey just now.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, enjoy. I hope you guys have fun and we'll talk again shortly.
Sounds good. Thank you, Michelle.
So much.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Visit www.clairvoyaging.com for show notes, merch, or just to say hi. If you'd like to support our journey, visit www.buymeacoffee.com/clairvoyaging. This has been a production of Wayfeather Media.